but it'll be good discipline. Every husband has heard that many times from his wife, and it helped him to be a better husband. So, we are here to mourn the passing of a very, very dear friend and family member. So, this is an appropriate place for tears. The measure of our tears is the measure of Chris's influence in our lives. But we're here for more than mourning. This is a celebration of life, an extraordinary life, extremely well lived. He was, it still is, a great gift to us. He made us laugh until it hurt. Yeah. But he also made us think until we understood his passion. Chris was a great communicator, by word and by film. So let's take this opportunity to remember the great gift that he was and still is to us. So now, I'd like to do one thing before we go further. I'd like to take a moment of prayer for Cecia and the kids and the family. So if you just stretch out your hand, we're going to pray for them now. Father, Lord Jesus, Holy Spirit, we pray your peace, your divine comfort and peace upon Cecia, Kelia, and Lincoln, and upon the entire family, Lord, cousins, aunts, uncles, mother, and to all of us who grieve his passing, Lord, we pray your comfort come and be real to us. We pray this in the all-powerful name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, Cindy Johnson's going to come and give us a synopsis of Chris's life and his passion and his accomplishments. No, we're not. We're not going to do that at all. In fact, I'm not sure why I'm here. I'd like to introduce you to a multi-level marketing opportunity that something changed a few minutes ago and no one told me. We're going to have Glenn, and we're going to have the film.
Yes. I'll explain really quickly.
Please.
So some years ago, Chris wanted to make a silent film. And in the spirit of silent films, there is usually no soundtrack. And when silent films would be released to theaters, they would have the film, and there would be an organist or another musician in the theater to play along with it. And that's what he wanted to try to recreate when he made this film some years ago called Sousaphone. So I'm going to attempt, as the one who was asked to do the music, to try to play it again for you as you see this original film of his, which he revived a few years ago and submitted to film festivals literally around the world. And so we wanted to share with you Sousaphone.
love that Chris could create humor with no words, because you didn't hear him silent very often, so I thought that was the ironic part, but he can still be funny, even in silence. I love that. So I'm going to just share some remembrances. I appreciate just the opportunity to honor Chris. I've been Chris's friend for about 20 years, kind of a sister, friend, brother, sister. So I just want to speak on him. First of all, Chris Preitauer, as Mark mentioned, born March 22nd, 1970 to Vernon Lee and Marcia Preitauer. We all know he's an amazing man. So he is actually the writer, he's the documenter, he's the speaker. I am not. So I took some of Chris's words for this remembrance. Some of you might know a lot of this, but I'm going to go through all of this for you. So Chris was born here, but when Chris was 7 years old, I'm going to start there, he moved to El Cajon, California. Living in El Cajon and having virtually no friends or acquaintances of color ensured that he was oblivious to the racial realities of the world around him. As a teenager, Chris watched Henry Hampton's award-winning Eyes on the Prize documentary series about the civil rights movement on PBS. The impact of this documentary on his life cannot be overstated, and he forever saw things differently. This awakening began an obsession with the civil rights movement, which eventually led years later to flying Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth out to San Diego for a few days. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that Fred Shuttlesworth was either insane or the most courageous man I've ever met. Sound familiar? It was Fred Shuttlesworth's years-long preparation of the city of Birmingham and inviting Dr. King that directly led to Birmingham's historic campaign against segregation. Challenged by San Diego community organizer Robert Tambuzzi that his understanding of people of color was all book knowledge and no experience, Chris moved from El Cajon to an apartment in Lemon Grove with 2 African-American roommates. He quit his job and accepted a position as the only white male employee at an organization located in the southeastern region of San Diego. Later, he switched his church membership to a virtually all-black congregation in the 3rd District, which he became actively involved in and attended for 10 years. Of course, all of this cultural transplantation included the much-anticipated growing pains that come with having been raised in an oblivious, all-white environment. Even with these challenges, his new life bore beautiful fruit. He became the godfather of an amazing person, he made lifelong friends, and he learned both painful and glorious truths that he had the honor of transferring to his children. These things made that journey worthwhile. Ruminating on Robert Tambuzzi's admonition about the limitations of academia, you can tell Chris wrote some of this, right? The limitations of just academia, Chris initiated his own civil rights-related internship by traveling to virtually every key historical civil rights location in the United States to learn firsthand about those who suffered and triumphed in the civil rights movement. Among those he met were whites who had infamously defended segregation, such as former Governor George Wallace and Hazel Bryan Massery. She was on the front page, she was the front page antagonist on the Little Rock Nine. This internship of his own culminated with a letter from Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, thanking him for sharing her burden by keeping the memory of her son alive. It is the 1955 murder of her 14-year-old son, Emmett, that made many historians cite as the impetus for the civil rights movement. This journey also led him unforgettably to the inside of a Birmingham, Alabama courtroom to be present with the victims' families when Klansman Tommy Blanton was convicted 38 years later of the 1963 bombing of the 16th Baptist Church, or 16th Street Baptist Church, which killed 4 little girls. Dr. King conducted the eulogy and referred to the bombing as one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity. Chris never forgot the palpable weight of history in that Birmingham courtroom when an African-American female juror rendered the verdict of guilty. And I just want to note, today is actually the 65-year anniversary of when Ruby Bridges integrated a non-white school. So I think that's really special today. So when Chris accepted a producer position later at KPBS, which is, the PBS affiliate here in San Diego, the first 30-second TV spot that he produced contained a hidden nod to the cultural journey that PBS had started in him when he was a teenager years before. Chris put Fred Shuttlesworth's name, who was introduced to him through this documentary, The Eyes on the Prize, on the clapperboard shown at the end of the 30-second spot. Seeing his name broadcast to the San Diego community through KPBS after knowing what his introduction meant for Chris as a teenager was deeply meaningful to him. Everything he did had a meaning behind it, everything. As a part of this journey, Chris was asked by Dr. Claiborne Carlson to join him in furthering the legacy of Dr. King and other human rights leaders through his work as a visual storyteller. Yes, we know he is a storyteller. Dr. Claiborne Carlson was asked by Coretta Scott King in 1985 to edit and publish the papers of her late husband. Dr. Carlson founded the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute at Stanford University for that purpose. Chris's video collaborations have been used in classrooms at both Stanford University and UCLA. At the beginning of 2022, Chris completed production on a documentary about the Freedom Riders through Dr. Claiborne Carlson and the World House Project. This film won Best Short Documentary at the Harlem International Film Festival and the Coronado Island Film Festival, and has received official selection in more than a dozen film festivals around the world. For Chris, however, the most meaningful award the film received was the Henry Hampton Award for Excellence in Documentary Filmmaking. Selection for this award brought tears to his eyes because, if you remember, it was the late Henry Hampton who created and produced Eyes on the Prize, the documentary he had watched on KPBS as a teenager that opened his eyes to the world around him. Chris also wrote, directed, and produced a series called Our Story. This series of short films celebrate the actions of ordinary people doing extraordinary things within the civil rights movement. If I could ask two things of you that are here tonight, if you haven't already, first take the time to watch Our Story. It's a series of videos, and they're amazing. If you only have a few minutes, you'll learn so much just in that little bit of time. They're just incredible. Beyond that, especially if you're one of Chris's friends and you happen to be white, I really encourage you to take the time to watch the series Eyes on the Prize. I encourage you to do this because I think you would be changed, and I think that Chris would be incredibly touched and hopeful that it changes you too. In addition to filmmaking, Chris curated an online museum of civil rights and race-related ephemera. That's the word that he uses. Originally, this collection began as an effort to connect to the history on a visceral level by actually holding these papers and objects in his hands and mentally taking himself back to those times. The Civil Rights Heritage Museum showcases the artifacts for others to be able to do the same, to take the history from the textbook to a meaningful cognitive experience. And that's really what Chris wanted. Everything in his life that he experienced, he wanted everyone to experience it on that same level. So besides these amazing projects and all of, I could go on for probably hours. We'd be here all night, and we definitely run over 9 o'clock. If I talked about everything that Chris did, working within and learning and teaching about the civil rights movement. But in addition to that, he participated in a lot of other events to support the communities around him. He participated in the Stand with Charlottesville protest. He participated in the Screen Actors Guild protest as well. And he was always standing up for his people in different ways. A couple other things about Chris is that he went all in all the time. When he went to propose to Cecia, he did a 350 candle proposal on the beach in Mexico. But I also want to say he did not do that. His friend Roberto and I did that, just saying. I'm just saying. This is how much I love Chris, okay? This is what a good friend I am. He didn't do things simple. He had a whole plan. We worked on it for months. It was insane. But that's the way he was, and that's how much he loved her. He had a love for photography and documenting moments. Obviously, by what you saw when you walked in and what you'll see the rest of this evening, he documented everything. He just had a passion for holding on to those things that were special to him. He also loved Back to the Future, and he loved his flux capacitor. I almost brought it to hold it up. He would have been so happy, and then I forgot to grab it. In fact, when I was looking through his Facebook to kind of find any information I had missed, he has a whole Facebook album dedicated to his flux capacitor, just so you know. And he's like sleeping with it and eating with it and traveling with it. You guys know this, right? He loved and was also very critical of Michael Jackson. And I'm telling you guys, the last 2 weeks, almost every day I've gotten in my car, a Michael Jackson song has come on. He just had such a passion for his music and what he did in the world. He also had a passion, as you know, for the Hotel del Coronado, just the history and everything about it. I also found, and I did not know this before, that is actually the place where he first read the Bible cover to cover back in 2009. So I know that held significance for him. A few people that were important to Chris, one was Bob Hope. Who knew this already? I know his family probably knew. So he was obsessed with Bob Hope as a kid and used to tell people his name was Chris Hope. No lie. Chris was an old soul, for sure, and he actually used to dress like an old soul for a very long time. We're really glad Ceci came along and we made some shifts on that. But I always thought of him as an old soul, and that proved the point. I already mentioned this person, but Fred Shuttlesworth, I couldn't stand up here without talking about him again. Fred Shuttlesworth was whipped with a chain for trying to enroll his kids in a white school. He advertised he was going to do this, and he knew he would suffer for it. And what he did, like I mentioned, was it was a key part to the civil rights movement. He invited Dr. King to Birmingham to come and see what they were doing. As a result, the 1964 Civil Rights Act can basically be attributed initially to his efforts. The last person I'll mention is Smith Wigglesworth, and this one really, you guys will relate with this. He was an amazing man of God who led the kind of life that Chris intended to, and I believe that he did. He was unapologetic, constantly healing the sick, raising the dead, and leading the lost to God through a relationship with Jesus. I mean, Chris, you did that. The people in this room, I know many of you, that you were impacted directly by his strong belief that everyone could have a relationship with God and what that could look like. He had a commitment to that life. So like I mentioned, he's one of my best friends the last 20 years or so, kind of like a brother. Whenever we'd have get-togethers, like Chris was always there. All my friends know Chris. I'm like, You've met him? Okay, he's probably always there. But when we'd get in a room together, there'd be a group of us, and we'd go stand in the kitchen or step outside. Everybody would just say, you know what, we'll come back in a couple hours because they're not going to stop talking. Some of you know that for true. But Chris was so deep. He wasn't afraid to cross those mental and emotional barriers to have the harder conversations about life and truth, even when that meant questioning God. And those are the conversations that he was not afraid to have. But he would also have those talks with God, like the way that Job did. He struggled with God at times because of the injustices in the world. Right now, especially this past year, I mean, we know what's happening in our world, and every time I just want to pick up the phone and hash it out with him, and that's the kind of person that he was. But he also, obviously, like I said, he had a passion for civil rights, but for all people, and it was almost intrinsic to him. He didn't think, I'd like to have a passion and I'm going to start a hobby. It would just come out of him. It was just who he was. Obviously, his laughter and humor, I'll tell a couple funny stories. I know Mark's got a lot more coming. But he just always put meaning to every single encounter. I don't know if you guys remember this face, but he would come up to you and, I was thinking, and the very next thing is an absolute lie or some insane story that is not true at all. I was thinking, and like this far off look, or he'd go, oh my gosh, I got to tell you, oh my gosh, I got to tell you something, oh my gosh. So those were the kind of things I always think about with him. Whenever he would meet someone, he'd always bring his whole heart and to make it memorable. Ceci was telling me about when the four of them would go out to eat at a restaurant, normal family function, you would think, and Chris would get up to go to the bathroom. And they'd look around, they're like, gosh, he hasn't come out for a while. They look over, and he's sitting at another table with another family. And he finally comes over, and he says, well, yeah, I came out of the bathroom, I just sat down, and then I looked around and realized, that's not you guys. So I just started talking to him, made friends, stayed at the table, finally came back. I know that happened more than once. That was Chris. So, he was always authentic. His humor wasn't, he wanted to make people laugh, he wanted to make people happy, but he never did it in a fake way, like, oh, I'm going to think of this thing. It just came out of him like a little fountain. Two stories one story I'm going to tell you is both on the same trip. Those of you that were in the business with us, you'll know. He would speak a lot at our get-togethers, and he got up one time to speak, and me being the big sister, I was like, oh, here we go. And he would tell stories, and he would engage everyone, the crowd's laughing. Well, he always thought that it was really funny how soccer players, when they play soccer, they get a little kick like this, and then they're just, on the ground, and they're flailing about. I just told that story explaining it. You can picture a soccer person, right? Like a soccer player flailing about. No, he had to act that out. So he trips himself on the stage and goes flying over here and starts writhing about and keeps going. What I thought for 20 minutes, it was probably 30 seconds. And I was like, Chris, get up. That's enough. Everybody gets it. But the whole crowd was like in tears, laughing. And if you see one of the pictures when we show the slideshow again, I think he's dancing in a hat, doing this crazy dance. If you zoom in, his face is so intense on this dance. He has a sombrero on. I mean, he was like sweating it out on the floor. It was like none of us needed to be there. He was just in his own little world. But he would always go all in, and everyone would just enjoy that. So a couple of things, and I do have something to read from his former church. One thing I want to say, though, is we all have parts of him, every single one of us in this room. And I know we've all been thinking about that in the last couple weeks, but if we think about, we want to miss someone while they're not here with us. And we know, yes, we are going to see you again. But I really believe that part of Chris's spirit is a piece of each of us. When we all came in, I know a lot of us saw each other for the first time in a while, and we all just started smiling and laughing. That's Chris. And if you're not sure, take a look at his son Lincoln's face, and he'll make a face, and you're like, how is that not his father right there in his face? And if you see his daughter and you talk to Kelia, and her heart is literally Chris's heart. Like, he's a part of us and of his family. So I'm going to read one thing from, I'm going to read the resolution. There was a resolution sent in from the Born Leaders Young Adult Ministry at New Creation Church of San Diego. So I'm going to go ahead and read this aloud. It says, in loving memory of Chris John Preitauer, March 22nd, 1970 to October 24th, 2025. Whereas Christopher John Preitauer was a beloved alumnus of the Born Leaders Young Adult Ministry at New Creation Church of San Diego, where he grew in faith, leadership, and purpose during his formative years. And whereas Christopher embodied the spirit of Born Leaders by taking the foundation laid in his young adult years and building a life of service, advocacy, and unwavering commitment to God's call on his life. And whereas Christopher never forgot where he was planted and continued to be a source of encouragement and inspiration to the ministry, demonstrating what it means to lead with integrity, courage, and love. And whereas Christopher's dedication to civil rights and social justice was a direct outflowing of his faith in Christ and his conviction that every person bears the image of God and deserves dignity, equity, and justice. And whereas Christopher remained connected to his spiritual community throughout his life, seeking godly counsel, offering wisdom to others, and maintaining relationships that sustained him in his calling. And whereas Christopher's legacy as a husband, father, historian, activist, and man of God will continue to inspire young leaders to live boldly for Christ and courageously for others. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Born Leaders Young Adult Ministry and the New Creation Church San Diego community mourns the loss of Christopher John Preitauer while celebrating a life well lived in service to God and humanity. Be it further resolved that we extend our heartfelt prayers and support to Christopher's wife, children, and all who loved him, trusting in the promise of eternal life through Jesus Christ. Be it finally resolved that Christopher's example of faithful leadership and sacrificial love will remain a guiding light for all who knew him and for generations of young leaders to come. Adopted this 14th day of November, 2025. I'm going to read one last thing, and I was going to do you the favor of singing this, but I have a cold today, so I'm going to read it. And if you know the chorus, you can sing it out loud if you'd like. But I wanted to leave us with this from one of Chris's songs that he loved. As God gives me grace, who knows this one? Anybody? As God gives me grace, I'll run this race until I see my Savior face to face. I'm going up yonder, I'm going up yonder, I'm going up yonder to be with my Lord. Thank you.
It's wonderful the way we're all brought together in this from so many different backgrounds, so many different perspectives. Somehow Chris touched all of us. And we've got a montage, short video montage that was created at KPBS by one of his co-workers in honor of him. So we're going to see that now.
I'll always remember Chris's enthusiasm and his energy and his knowledge and his expertise but his energy and enthusiasm seemed boundless. And I particularly appreciated about Chris how much he made a point to lift up every single person.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to have this interest in the first place? Because we discovered you.
When I was a teenager, I watched the Eyes on the Prize documentary series, the award-winning series, and I was not the same after seeing it. Growing up in a very white community, I didn't know any of the civil rights stories. Of course, everyone hears about Dr. King and that he gave this famous and inspirational speech. But for a lot of people like me, there was this perception of, oh, what a great thing Dr. King did for Black people. And what I came to realize, and actually what Dr. King explicitly said, was that our psyche is damaged when we hold beliefs of hatred or superiority. And I'm not talking about burning a cross on someone's lawn or wearing a sheet. It can just be the most subtle forms of thinking you're better. And by the way, I grew up as a Christian. It got me thinking about how many generations of white people grew up not being able to fully communicate and even serve their God because their minds were polluted with not being their brother's keeper, not loving their neighbor. And all the while sitting in churches singing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, but generations of people that literally lived and died without the fullness of who they could have been because of that filth in their hearts. And that's the kind of thing that Dr. King did for people like me, is to help me to realize and search my own heart for things that shouldn't be there. I grew up in San Diego, California, and that's actually, I didn't grow up in the South. If I grew up in the South, I might have had more opportunity to learn some of the stories, to learn about some of the foot soldiers.
I was so glad to read about how he came to be, because he was a startlingly anti-racist white guy who was from San Diego, and I thought, how does that work? I mean, I just don't know. And then when I read his kind of autobiography, then I understood.
I'm excited about other projects that we imagine that will get younger people excited, because we do know that the civil rights movement, for example, was fueled by young people. And I feel like moving forward, that's always going to be the case. That's going to be the heartbeat of any new movement. And so to be able to give the tools to people for whom the baton will be passed to, satisfying work.
Especially in these times we're living in, where a lot of history and the maintenance of history, whether that be through the attack on museums or DEI education as a whole, having these videos like Mr. Preitauer was making absolutely is important to maintaining the legacy of various figures that did real work that still affects us today, but we may struggle with finding and knowing the story of.
So that was my purpose for wanting to get Rome. My grandmother wanted me to be a minister, so she got me into American Baptist College up in Nashville. So I was working really hard, and John Lewis was my roommate. He said, listen, these workshops are going on. And he said, you need to come to the workshops.
Chris was an excellent filmmaker, and he was also an amazing friend and colleague. He was creative, clever, and funny.
For the sake of time, we're going to do just one of these songs. I had two, but I think appropriately the song that we could do together is actually a song called Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. Music was a very important part of the civil rights movement, often used as a rallying cry, as a way of unity. In fact, with a song like this, what people would do, and you don't have to reenact this, is that as they were marching, like many of the marches he saw, with Dr. King, they would have their hands together, and I never do this the right way. Just do this. And they would hold their hand, here, give me that hand, poor daughter. And then you'd make a chain, and you would make that chain not only to show unity, but also to be able to be together as resistance to those protests would happen and police and others would come. So I won't make you do that tonight, but this is a call and response, and some of you know this song. And ironically, I picked this not knowing or not remembering the story about how the documentary of the same name was so important to him. So we'll do call and response. I think you'll figure it out after a while. But those of you who know it, in fact, give me a nod if you kind of know this song. Good. Feel free to sing along. And you can follow Vivi, my daughter. She'll be doing the part that's a response. Paul and Silas bound in jail, had no money for to go their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Paul and Silas thought they was lost. The dungeon shook and the chains come off. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Now follow up, my daughter. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Freedom's name is mighty sweet, and soon we're gonna meet. And keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. I got my hand on the gospel plow. Won't take nothing for my journey now. And keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Only chain that a man can stand is that chain of hand in hand. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. I'm gonna board that big Greyhound, carry the love from town to town. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
One of the best parts of a celebration of life are hearing others talk about Chris. We've each had a little bit of an opportunity to do that, but now we're going to take the great risk of having an open microphone. Now, in church, an open microphone is the most dangerous thing that you can do. It's time management chaos. So I'm going to be the heavy-handed guy that takes the hook and drags them off the stage when they go on too long. Having said that, no one's going to want to share at all. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take about 10 minutes. And if we told stories about Chris, we'd be here till breakfast. But if we said, this is what I loved best about him, this is how he influenced me, this is his character that I wish I were more like, If we said things like that, we can all say it in a minute. So I'm inviting you to come, and we're going to take about 10 minutes, which is about 10 people. And if you'd come and line up here, at least 10 people, then we'll have you come and tell us about Chris and what he meant to you. And then after that, I'm going to have some things to say. So who wants to start? Come on up. So, who wants to be second? I can't believe it. Chris's influence was so vast, we've only got like 1 or 2 people. You should be fighting for each other. You should be pushing people out of the way so you can get in the line. Anyway, let's start to create this line. Why don't you come and start?
So my name is Marissa. I met Chris, I think I was a sophomore in college back in '93. I can definitely relate to a lot of the things that you said as far as the chit-chatting and the talking for hours. I met him when we were doing United's first Summer of Peace. He would bring me home from these meetings, and we'd sit in front of my house and talk for hours. And I mean, literally, and about God knows what. And that's how our friendship blossomed. And I would come back from college, and we'd hang out, and we just had this really beautiful friendship that evolved over the years. And it was kind of like, why are you so interested in the Black experience? And I went to Tuskegee University, which is a historically Black college. He came down when you were talking about reenacting or being a part of Black history and the different and I can't think of the words that you used, but he came back for the reenactment of the march from Selma to Montgomery, also known as Bloody Sunday. And we spent time during that visit talking about everything, and it was just the person he was. He absolutely walked the walk, and he absolutely talked the talk. And then I came home another year, and he was talking about he was going to meet this girl in Mexico, and she didn't really speak any English, and I'm like, okay. And so we sat at my aunt's house, and we talked in the den. I've told her, Cecia, this. We spoke for a couple of hours, and I'm like, okay, now don't do this, don't do that. Okay, what now? And then the next thing I know, he's proposing to her on the beach. So, but he was a beautiful person. He was a beautiful person, and I'm going to miss him terribly.
I'm going to ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
Listening to you, what did you like best about him? What characteristic of him did you enjoy the most?
His sense of humor, how he could just come up with something just like that. He laid us out laughing one time. So during the United Summer of Peace, there were all these march. I don't know what was going on, honestly. I can't remember. I'm 52 and perimenopausal, so I can't remember. But we had all met up at I think it was it was during Pride. The Pride Parade that whole time, and then there was some sort of meeting, and we all met up outside. I just remember we were outside, and Greg Akili, who was a part of the whole organization, some of you may know him, some of you may not, and he said, yeah, I just left the Pride Parade, and Chris looks at him, so did you get any numbers?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is so Chris. Come on.
Hello. My name is Mark. I actually met Chris through our lovely pianist, Glenn Molina. We both attended the same high school, and Chris attended high school in Santee. So when I was introduced to Chris, to me it was kind of like meeting my long-lost twin brother. He was so. He loved fun, but he was so completely inventive with the hijinks that he would get into. And the core group of our friends that we had, we would get in, we each had our own roles. So Chris's role was the idea person, to come up with the wackiest, craziest idea of the thing to do. My job was to say that, no matter how ridiculous it is, that is the best idea I've ever heard in my life, and we are going to go ahead and do that. So our other friends, Maynard, and Rhonda, and we each had our role of supporting Chris and supporting each other. And then Glenn's role was to make sure that we knew exactly how much trouble we were going to get into by doing anything that Chris suggested. So just one small example of this is Chris decided that we should, as a group, do a bonding experience. And as opposed to a trust fall, we decided to sneak through a fence at Griffith Park and climb the Hollywood sign, which we effectively did. That's in one of the photos here. And so the entire way, Chris and I are chatting and joking and laughing, and everyone's having a great time, and Glenn is leading from the rear, saying, we are going to get into trouble. I'm going to go to jail. I'm just too nice and too pretty for all this. And that was Chris in a nutshell, is being able to have so much fun. I like to think of our time together as mild vandalism and moderate trespassing. Nothing awful, nothing that ever put anyone, made them feel bad about themselves or making fun of anyone's expense, but specifically just building each other up. And that's what, you asked what Chris's, the thing that I most liked about Chris, it was just his vivaciousness, his love for life, and his love to build up and make better the people that were around him. And I mean, I know for a fact that I am a better person, and I am aware of the issues in our society around race, specifically because of Chris. Everything I ever needed to know about social justice and racial equality, I learned from him. And that is just that is a gift that I try to pass not only to my own children, but to everyone around me. So, amen. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Come on up. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
My name is Maisha Lewis. Definitely, Chris touched my soul and my spirit, and continually does that as I think of the memories and the things that I've experienced with Chris. I met him, I was probably it was in 93 as well. He worked, I was at the nonprofit organization that he worked at, and he had just a genuine soul and a genuine spirit. And we would just hang out and talk, just like you guys did. And at that time, my daughter was probably about a year old, and I was doing the single parent life. And he just embraced her like nobody's business. She laughed with him as a one-year-old could do. So I was like, this man has just really stolen my daughter away from me. So I made him her godfather, which he loved it. Anything that you did or gave him an opportunity to be, he was very appreciative of that. And he loved people for who they were. One of the things that I like about him, of course, his humor, but one of the things that is that he took people for who they were. He did not want to see the bad in people. He wanted to say that this is who you genuinely are. And sometimes I had to pull that coattail and say, well, he's not always like that. But he took people, he saw the good in people. He said, I can take this, I can run with it, I can do something with it. And he did just that. Like, he took the stories. He was very inquisitive. So he asked those questions. Like, you see him in this documentary, he's definitely profound. He's definitely a long way. He would ask questions of why this and the feeling of this and how was that. And sometimes, we went back and forth. I was like, if you don't go somewhere and sit down. But that was that was him. That was who he was. He was learning. He was in the process. He wanted to understand. And you couldn't do nothing more than accept that for who he was. One quick story, and then I'll sit down. My daughter's tired of hearing it. I actually wrote about it outside. He took her to the park one day, a day out with grandfather. We're just going to hang out. Let's go have fun. And I'm like, sure, no problem. Take my daughter. And I'm thinking everything's great. And this is the one time that I ever saw any fear in Chris. He called me. He said, the police think your daughter has been kidnapped. So I had to speak with the police. I had to, he's fine. She's supposed to be with him. Everything is good. But there was true, genuine fear that day. But that was who Chris was. That's just how he was. So I just kind of wanted to tell you that.
Was awesome. That was awesome. Come on up. Really good.
Good evening. Tim Palmer, knew Chris, met him our freshman year of high school in marching band. And all the stories of stupidity from high school, we covered them all. After high school, we just didn't connect. Life moved on. And I was extraordinarily blessed to be able to reconnect with him about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was wonderful. What I loved about Chris is we would talk, and we'd be on the phone, and we'd be laughing our full butts off the whole time. Now, Chris and I actually told him, I said, you and I need to do a podcast, because he and I loved each other. We loved world around us. But we would disagree sometimes in the paths to get to that point. And so he would say something, and I'd disagree with him, and I'd mock him, and we'd laugh. And I'd say something, and he would disagree with it, and he would mock me, and we'd laugh. And we'd laugh, and we'd laugh, but we always talked. And I just so valued those conversations, because that's what we need. It doesn't matter who you agree with. It doesn't matter who you disagree with. Laugh your butts off and enjoy each other. And so I truly love that. Didn't get to see him enough. So happy I got to see him again. So Cisa, thank you for sharing him with me sometimes. And Mom, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Juan Ramos. I met Chris in 2006, but about half of you guys sitting here. And at that time, I thought that I was funny. And then I met Chris, and it's like, okay, I don't stand a chance here. And I'll tell you later 2 things that I love about Chris, but let me tell you this quick story. On a dark, late night in March 2007, because of the brokenness and just my childhood, my mind was going through dark places, including suicide. And about 2 a.m., I'm thinking about all of this in a parking lot, and this voice was very loud and said, "Don't do it." And I said, "Why not?" And before I could get an answer, these 2 bright lights hit me, and it was Chris in his car. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm trying to get away from God." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "He keeps talking to me and asking me to do something. I don't want to do it. And I'm at home, and he won't leave me alone. So I've been driving all over San Diego, and he's still asking me for something, and I just don't know." And then he goes, "Go home." And I said, okay, I went home. That next day at the office, he said, "Hey, I could get in trouble for this, but it's my office, it's my business, and I'm just going to do what God wants me to do, and I'm just going to give you my testimony, and somebody's going to be saved tonight." And he gave his testimony, and then he said, "If that impacted you, come and see me afterwards." So everybody went to the left, and I was ready. I went to the right, and I said, "Can I talk to you?" And he goes, "It's you." And I said, "Yeah, maybe." He forgot about everything. He walked me outside. He heard me. He led me through a prayer. Changed my life forever. Later, witnesses here, I met my wife. We raised 2 strong, handsome boys, right? And we led a lot of people to the Lord, thank God. And that's part of his legacy that we've been talking about tonight, right? He left that DNA with us. He was bold about it. He didn't like it at first, God talking to him, but he did it anyway, right? He had courage. And so let me tell you about the 2 things that I loved about him. You saw that interview, right, where he's interviewing, right, for a job, and you can see him pausing. And it's not that he doesn't know what to say. He was so bright and so smart. he had to choose what he was going to say, right? And you can see all those gears just grinding and burning and going 1,000 miles an hour, right? And so he had to choose. I love that about him, that he was so logistical about what he was going to say, right? The other thing is we lost our boy 2.5 years ago, our oldest boy, and my wife's like, well, Chris and Cecia are coming. And I was like, awesome. And she goes, no, they were on their way to a vacation. And I'm like, what do you mean? She was like, no, they were ready to go on vacation, but they're coming. Who does that? Chris. Chris and his wife, his family would do that. When they showed up at the services, I'm like, bro, what are you doing here? You're on vacation. He goes, I wouldn't be anybody else. You're hurting right now. I'm here for you. That was Chris. You know, he gave his heart 100%, one to the Lord and to the people he knew. Last thing that I liked about Chris, I don't know if you noticed, but when you were talking to him and he would stop you, said that, but let me ask you something. He paid attention 100% to what you were going to say. That great mind of his never stopped wanting to learn, and he wanted to learn from everybody. Nobody was less important than anybody else. He would stop and listen because the only thing that mattered to him at that point is what you were going to share with him. So I love him. I'm going to miss him. God bless you. Thank you.
I'm going to close. I'm sorry, guys, but we've just hit our time. I wish we... What? Okay. White, for some reason, this is important. But short.
I appreciate it. My name is Dwight. Chris and I met at Christian High School. I was a year above him, so I met him as I was a sophomore and he was a freshman. Chris and I, we were both trumpet players together. We were instantly bonded, as a lot of you know. And what you may not know is, as of all the important work that Chris has done, the very first organization that he was the co-president of in high school, he was the co-president with me in the stud corps at Christian High School. Yeah, it was something. And Chris and I, of course, just laughed all the time. We would do things, he would want, you know, Mark said something, which I really love this. Chris never got a laugh from somebody at the expense of somebody else. He was kind and an amazing person. And I could tell stories, but I don't get to because we don't have time. But I do want to say that Chris and I didn't always see eye to eye. And my problem with that is that I didn't take the time to necessarily listen. And I screwed up a lot of years of friendship at the very end for that. And to sacrifice friendship because we don't necessarily agree on something is foolishness and stupidity. And I encourage all of you never to do that for whatever reason, whatever your beliefs are of any reason. It's never worth it. I will say one thing. I was just about to go to Bible college. I had just done something that was a stupid decision, and I was really wrecked about it. And Chris and I weren't getting along right at the very end for some reason at high school. I don't remember what happened. It doesn't matter. But I remember he's the first person I wanted to see, and I went over to your house, Marcia, and I went up to Chris, and I told him what happened, and he said, Dwight, I've always had this for this special occasion. He pulled out the Bible. He read a passage to me. We read it together and cried. And for all the times that Chris and I cried laughing together, Chris was an amazingly compassionate and wonderful person, and this earth is a little less amazing because of his loss. So, Chris, I love you. I'm sorry. Can't wait to see you one day, buddy. Thank you.
But it's going to be short. That's what I was afraid of. Go get him.
People, people, people. I didn't never think that I would meet another fool like myself. But Chris, I don't know whether we were rivals. I don't know who was more of an idiot. I've got one other friend that's like me, and I made my mother mad, and I told her she had to meet my brother. It wasn't Chris. But the relationship between me and Chris, when he was at New Creation Church, was like no one else in this room. That was my brother. Now, I didn't think I was going to come up, but as I thought about it, I'm like, I'm not going to let him get out of here without me just letting you know what a genuine, true, American-blooded man he was. He loved anybody that walked on this earth. That's what he did. He didn't care about what you thought, what you looked like, where you came from. He didn't give a rat's. But that guy has something that we all long for. I'm just going to give you this short scenario, and then I'm going to close it out with a bang. But we're all in this great big play. And the world is a great big stage. Now, I usually don't tell them maybe one person here and every one person there every blue moon. But I want to tell you this tonight. Everybody in this room has a place. And on that stage, and when you're on the stage, you have a square, and your name is on the square. But your square is transparent. Every once in a while, your square lights up, so your name lights up. But the more you're on your square, it lights up more because where you're supposed to be. Now, the more you're on it, not only does its light start shining underneath, but there's a square above every square as well. And on every square, there's a light. And that light starts to come on the more you're on your square. Now I'm closing this out. So the more you're on your square, you're lightening up because you're where you're supposed to be. Every last one of you, you're where you're supposed to be, not where you want to be. Where he wants you to be is where you're needed. And when that light underneath your feet starts lighting up and your name is starting to get brighter and brighter, the more he's working on you and working on you like a piece of coal, because he's trying to twist you and turn you into something so genuine. I want you to start thinking about a gym. Down here we are, coming to a close. Your light shining underneath. The light shining down on you. You know who's shining the light from above. So now, the more you're on it, you're starting to develop yourself into what he would want you to be. Now, right when we started out, here's an L, and here's a 7. You put them together, you got a square, all right? An L square. But this is what it is. When you take that square and you turn it 1 quarter, think about what you've just become. Does anybody know what that is? Say it out.
It's a diamond.
You hear that? It's a diamond. It took one person just that fast to get it. Every last one of you is trying to become Christ-like. But that guy, Chris, he was all that and 50 million bags of chips. Chris, yabba dabba doo.
Thank you. Well, there's a theme that runs through all of this. Chris was a passionate person. When he believed in something, he would die for it. It's the kind of person he was. I'm going to tell you how I got to know Chris, and I saw a passion that I've never seen in anybody else. was a Sunday, and Cindy came to the church because her cousin talked her into it. She's standing in the church during worship, and Pastor John has a word of knowledge from the Lord. He knows something that God just told him about someone in the congregation. John said there's someone here with a foot problem, and it's been chronic, and it won't go away. It needs to be healed. Cindy had that foot problem, and it so shocked her that someone would know an intimate detail about her life that she was deeply impressed. She sensed that God was conscious of her situation. So she went back to the office and told all these people this wonderful thing that happened. So Chris, who has insatiable curiosity and will leave no stone unturned, decided that I need to go to this church to find out what the heck is going on there. So he came the next Sunday with Cindy. I think the two of you were there. I didn't know Cindy, didn't know Chris. We have a habit at the end of worship, people come forward for prayer, and we end up laying hands on them and praying for healing and listening to God to see if there's a message he might want to bring to them, and that often happens. And we were praying, and I was standing there just watching what was going on, and I saw this new guy in the front row. And I got a word from the Lord for him, and I went over and said, "Hi, I know this is a bit awkward, but I think God is telling me things about your life." And he got real curious. Why wouldn't he? And I started telling him what I thought God was saying about him and to him, and Chris was undone. And he said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Well, it's a gift. It's something God does through us for other people." He said, "How do you do that?" And I said, "Well, you kind of have to learn to listen, and you kind of have to know what to listen for." And he said, "I want to know how to do that." And I said, "Okay, we can help you with that." And then he said, "This whole healing thing you guys are involved in, what's that about?" I said, "Well, that's another gift of God, and sometimes we pray and we see people healed." And he said, "Do you know about healing?" And I said, yeah, I do." He said, "I want to know everything you know about healing." And that's, when he was on a subject, you were not going to stop him from getting what he wanted. He said, "Teach me everything you know about healing." And I thought, how am I going to do that? But I had a ministry trip to Guadalajara and León planned for a couple months in the future. I said, "Look, if you really want to know how this works, why don't you come with me to Guadalajara for a week, and we're going to do a bunch of meetings. And on the plane going down, I'll teach everything I know, and in the cars, trips back and forth between the cities, I'll teach you everything I know about hearing God's voice and about healing." And he said, "Will it work?" And he said, "Will it work?" And I said, "Look, I'll tell you what. If you're not hearing God for other people and giving accurate words by the end of the week, I will pay for your trip." I don't know why I said that, because I'm the cheapest person anyone. No, I mean, really, my church, this guy, you can't squeeze a dime out of him. It's not going to happen. But this came out of my mouth. "Yeah, I'll pay for your trip." He said, "Okay, let's go." So we went down, and he just pumped me. I mean, it was like a lawyer doing a wallet extraction. I mean, it was just horrible. That should have been funny. The image. I used to be a lawyer. That's why I think it's funny. But in any event, we did this trip together. And on the last night in León, there was a pastor's meeting the next morning. I don't know how much you understand of Mexican culture, but there's a very strong machismo. Men do not show weakness. It's just not part of the culture, especially not pastors who are leading congregations. So we had a pastor's meeting. Chris had a dream the night before, a very, very accurate dream with a clear-cut message. I won't go into the dream, but a very clear-cut message. And I said, "Tomorrow, when we meet with these pastors, I want you to get up and recount that dream, and then I'm going to interpret it, and let's see what God does with it." And he was really awkward. He didn't want to do it. But I called him up and made him do it. And he did it. And then I said, this father figure in Chris's dream, this coach, he was a high school coach in the dream, taking great love for his athletes. And I said, many of you are like those kids, but you never had a coach. You never had anyone that really cared about you. Your father was absent most of the time. And you've never experienced that kind of love, but you know you need it. If that's you, why don't you come forward? They all came forward. It was absolutely amazing. And we prayed for them. And Spirit of God into that place. Guys were weeping all over the room. I said, Chris, that's your dream. This is your dream. And then he saw some people healed on the trip, some pretty dramatic healings. And he came back, and this is the heart of it. He so wanted to see God love people that he decided, and he was single at this point. Oh, he also met Cecia. Cecia met you on that trip. That was the beginning of that. So he was still single, and he came back and he decided, if I'm going to see sick people healed, I need to find sick people. So he would go out on Friday and Saturday nights to the local Target store and shopping malls. He'd look for somebody. He prayed for a guy who had a broken wrist. And the cast came right up to there. The guy couldn't move his fingers. It was completely immobile. And he said to this kid, do you believe in Jesus Christ? And the kid said, no. And Chris said, if Jesus healed your wrist right now, would you give your life to him? And the kid said, yes. So Chris said, let me pray. Put his hands on his wrist, and he started to pray. About 30 seconds later, all of his fingers are moving, and he can move his wrist. Kid gave his life to the Lord right then and there. That started it. So that's like throwing gasoline. Chris is a fire, and that just threw gasoline on it. So now he decides, and this is radical. This gets really radical. Now he decides, I'm not finding enough sick people on weekends in San Diego, so I'm going to go alone, walking the streets of Tijuana at night, looking for sick people to heal. And my modus operandi will be, I will find a bilingual Mexican who also speaks English, who's sick. I will get him healed. He will then become my interpreter to help me find other people on the street to heal. I'm not kidding, people. He did this for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Partway into it, he's telling me these healing stories that are just wonderful. And I know they're the truth, because if you know Chris, it's the truth. He's telling me the story. He said, Chris, listen, this is astounding. You need to start recording this. We need documentary. I used to be a lawyer. I said, you need documentary evidence. And he said, well, what I'll do is I'll take my cell phone and I'll record on video healing taking place, and then I'll do an interview with them afterwards to find out if it worked. And I'll start documenting it. So he did that, and he was building up a body of evidence, and all these healings were happening. And then, I know this is a little crazy, but he said, I want to raise a dead person. I want to raise a dead, sure, I do that every day. Let me show you how it's done, right? So I said, well, Chris, we have a problem in our culture because we don't have access to dead people. It's a logistical problem. The hospitals take care of them, and then they go to mortuaries. So he says, well, I'm going to put an ad in Craigslist. He did. He put an ad in Craigslist. I am a Christian and want to raise the dead. If you have a dead relative or family member or whatever, he put his phone number in there. He didn't get any calls. I can't understand that. So, but he's not going to stop. No way. Okay, this isn't working. He started going to mortuaries to ask them if he could come in and pray for the dead people who were being brought into the mortuary. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. This guy is unhinged. This guy is crazy. The mortician said it's against the law. We can't do that. So he reluctantly gave up on his raising the dead ministry. But he focused on all the other ministries. Okay, here's the stats. I called him at 2.5 years and said, explain to me how many healings you've seen and how many people you led to Christ. Because I want you to understand, he wasn't doing the healings for the sake of the sensational. He was doing the healings in the same way that Jesus did them, to give a person evidence, incontrovertible evidence that God loves them. So, here's the sheet I wrote it all down on. I'm going to summarize it for you. He saw 125 healings. His success rate was 60%. That's a lot. He led 55 people to the Lord. He saw hepatitis C healed. He brought the woman who was healed to church with her medical reports, and I read her medical reports before and after his prayer. There was no trace of the hep C virus in her blood after he prayed for her. Yeah, remember that? He saw cancer healed. He saw cerebral palsy healed. Chris lived radical Christianity. He brought to his faith the same passion he has about everything that matters to him. Yeah, it's not, that's right, John. It's not radical Christianity. His was normal Christianity. Much of the time we live subnormal Christianity, but he was not content with subnormal Christianity. He took the Bible at face value, word for word, and he went out radically to live it. He wanted people to know Jesus. I believe that what he wants for this meeting tonight is not just a celebration of his life, but something more than his life, his life. And tonight's also about you. If you are here and you sense a need to know God, for whatever reason, we all have a reason hidden somewhere for why we need to know God. If you're here and you sense a need to know God personally, please come talk to me afterwards, and I'll introduce you to him. We're done. There's cookies and stuff in the fellowship hall. You go out the back doors and you turn left and you walk around and we end up right there. So why don't we get together and share with one another more Chris stories? And anyone that wants to know God a little better, come talk to me.